It's my algorithm, but I see Shiloh and Shedeur more than I've ever seen any undrafted guy or fifth round guy on social media in the history of Instagram, Threads, Twitter, X, whatever it is. Like, those dudes are everywhere. And they caught some of Deion's strays, right? Deion had a level of greatness that was untouchable, right? Deion could say, yeah, I'm not interviewing with these people because I'm not gonna be there in the draft. Deion could say, hey, I already ran 140. I ain't effing with no more of this testing because y'all already know I'm top 5 and it ain't tripping. Watch the film, know who I am. That's the difference between, I think, Deion and who his kids were. And then I think Deion's approach to it made other people, Deion's fame, right? Deion's success, Deion's ability to one day be a head coach in the league. Also, Deion's ability and what he's done in navigating the present, right? When we talk about college of his children and now going into the pros, this was the first thing he couldn't control. And they was like,
saying you think you've got the full story behind Shedeur Sanders and the NFL draft. Not so fast. Ryan Clark just dropped a bomb that's got everyone across the league talking. And this time, it's not about Shedeur's arm strength or how he handles the pocket. Nope, this runs deeper. According to Clark, this entire draft saga, it wasn't just about football. It was a calculated takedown. And the target, Coach Prime himself. Yeah, you heard that right. They used Deion Sanders' own son to go after him. For the first time in Deion's storied career, from electrifying days on the field to building programs on the sidelines, he was completely out of control. And when you hear "quit all out," how folks inside the league turned Shedeur into a tool to get at his father, you start to understand why Coach Prime uttered those 3 heartbreaking words. It did hurt, and let me tell you, as a dad, that hits you right in the gut. Now, I've been following this league for years, seeing draft day surprises, backdoor deals, and media takedowns. But I've never seen anything like what went down with Shedeur Sanders. When you hear Ryan Clark's breakdown, man, it all starts to click. This wasn't about evaluating talent. It was personal, fessed up in scouting reports and talking head chatter. Let me paint this picture for you. Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, the man who turned confidence into an art form. Back in the day, Deion could walk into any facility and say, I'm not doing your little combined workout. You already know I'm top 5. And he wasn't wrong. He owned every room he walked into. Controlled the story, the pace, the game. But this time, some folks in the NFL, folks who've been watching from the sidelines all these years, keeping tabs on Deion's swagger, his boldness, his success, his son their shot. And they took it the second his son declared for the draft. Think about it, Shedeur had 6 different offensive coordinators in college. 6. And still, the kid improved every time. Even behind lines that couldn't block a breeze, he delivered at Jackson State, then made the leap to Colorado, Power 5 territory, and the numbers, they speak for themselves. But did that matter? Nope. Instead, what did we hear? Rumors, questions about his character, talk about him being media unready. Suddenly, it wasn't about the film. It was about the headlines, about knocking the crown off Coach Prime's head by going after his own flesh and blood. This wasn't just draft talk. This was a message. And now that the dust is settling, folks are starting to see it for what it really was.
So many things about Shedeur during the draft process were character, personality. All these things that we can't prove on the outside, right? We were able to watch them.
So there were all these so-called reports floating around about Shedeur Sanders. Stuff like him wearing headphones at the wrong time, being standoffish with the media, all vague, unverified chatter. Nothing concrete, nothing you could actually prove. But also, nothing you could easily disprove either. And that's exactly what Ryan Clark called out. He said, look, every one of those Hiu Stories was built around something you couldn't nail down either way. And that's no accident. That's a tactic. When you can't knock the game tape, when the numbers speak for themselves, you shift the attack. You start going after a young man's character. You plant doubts. Whisper campaigns turn into rumors. Rumors turn into off concerns. And next thing you know, NFL front offices are forced to investigate. But here's the real gut punch. And this is where Clark pulled the curtain back. This wasn't about Shedeur at all. The kid wasn't the target. He was just caught in the crossfire. Clark said it plain, they weren't trying to tear down Shedeur Sanders, or they were trying to take a shot at his dad, Coach Prime. Just think about that. Imagine using someone's son, someone's child, as a pawn to get back at the father. That's not just dirty. That's calculated. That's personal. It's no longer football. It's vendetta territory. And tragically, it worked. For the first time in his remarkable career, Deion Sanders found himself in a fight he couldn't command, couldn't redirect, couldn't win by being the biggest personality in the room. The man who once controlled every play, every press conference, every narrative, was suddenly on the outside looking in.
That make you feel when you see your colleagues or your peers going in on you, man? Like, how does that make you feel?
No idea, man. You have no idea. They've always been in front of the camera, so they know how to navigate. They know how to handle themselves.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna catch them in no foolery and no mess. You're not. When you sit up there and say something like, he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Shedeur Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators, who has still functioned and went up, leveled up every time we brought somebody new in, and you're gonna tell me
situation.
You're gonna tell me he had on headphones?
So you a dog, your kid's a dog, and dogs gonna always rise to the top. You know what I mean? That's what I believe. You know what I mean? Then we're talking about
it did hurt. The Bible says God uses the foolish things to confound the wise. So it was some foolish stuff that went on, but you know what? That gave them something that they need.
You know, for most of his career, Deion Sanders wasn't just in the game. He was the game. He set the terms. He called the shots. NFL teams didn't tell Prime what to do. He told them. From his playing days all the way through to his coaching success, Deion controlled every aspect of his narrative. But now, for the first speaking his mind, his life, he was stuck watching something spiral that he couldn't stop. And that something was the takedown of his own son, as Ryan Clark put it. And he put it bluntly. This was the first time Deion Sanders ever looked powerless. The league couldn't rattle him on the field, couldn't knock him off his pedestal as a coach, but they found their angle. And they struck when he was most vulnerable, through his son. Clark said it best. They were waiting on this. They finally saw their chance, and they said, "Got you now." And man, it hurts just thinking about it. Not because it affected Deion's reputation or paycheck, but because it blindsided him as a father. In that now famous interview, when Coach Prime looked into the camera and quietly said, "It did hurt," you could hear the weight of it in his voice. This wasn't about football. This was about a father watching his son get dragged through the dirt for sins he never committed. Deion even admitted it. Those whispers, those character attacks, they weren't aimed at Shedeur. They were a preemptive strike at him. He said it himself. "A couple people who took shots at my kids, they were afraid I would go. Just think about that for a second. That's not scouting. That's fear. Fear of Prime making the leap to the NFL sidelines. Fear that he might bring his swagger, his standards, and his truth to the pro coaching world. So instead of facing him head on, some folks chose to try and knock out his foundation. But what really made this personal, what really tore at the heart, was who was holding the dagger. Ryan Clark pointed out that Chris Carter might have done the most damage, and that's because Carter wasn't just another analyst or critic. He was supposed to be a brother in arms. Same era, same grind, same respect. Instead, Carter chose to join the chorus of doubt. He took jabs at Shedeur, fanned the flames of a narrative already designed to smear. Meanwhile, Michael Irvin and Keyshawn Johnson, also Prime's contemporaries, took a different path. They defended the young man. They didn't see Deion's success as a threat. They saw it as inspiration. And that right there, that's the difference between envy and legacy. But here's where things get interesting, and Ryan Clark saw this coming a mile away. That smear campaign, it completely blew up in their faces. Clark joked it might just be his algorithm, but he sees more of Shedeur and Shedeur on social media than he's ever seen for any 5th-round pick or undrafted player, for that matter. Instagram, Threads, Twitter, they're everywhere. And you know what that tells us. The attempt to silence Shedeur only made him louder. By trying to tear him down, they amplified his visibility. The NFL wanted people to question his readiness, and instead made him one of the most talked about rookies out there. The kid's name is trending more than some first-round quarterbacks. Shedeur's landed in Cleveland, and let's be honest here, Joe Flacco's not the long-term answer. Kenny Pickett hasn't proven he's that guy. It's going to come down to Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel for that starting job. And after everything this young man has endured, you think a training camp battle is going to shake him. He's faced worse, much worse. This is a guy who survived 6 offensive coordinators in college, who played behind lines that couldn't protect a cardboard box, who carried entire programs on his back, and still delivered. Now, with a playbook in hand and a chip the size of a boulder on his shoulder, you better believe he's ready to prove something. And this is where the league really messed up. Every slight, every backhanded comment, every anonymous scout who whispered, "He's not ready." They didn't destroy the kid. They built a monster. He's got something to prove now, not just to the league, but to every voice that tried to tear him and his family down. And as Ryan Clark pointed out, This was more than about football. This was about legacy, about a father who's always done everything he could to protect his children, admitting for the first time, this might have happened because of me, and I can't take it off their shoulders. That's real. That's raw. And it's the most human we've ever seen Deion Sanders. But let's not forget, the same DNA that made Deion a once-in-a-generation athlete. It's alive and well in Shedeur. That confidence, that resilience, that cool, under-pressure attitude, it's all there. But now it's sharper, hardened, forged in adversity. They thought they could sabotage his draft stock. Instead, they created one of the most motivated rookie quarterbacks the NFL has seen in years. This is a young man who reads defenses like a pro, adjusts mid-play like a veteran, elevates his game every time the stakes get higher. He's had to fight harder, learn faster, and lead through more chaos than most rookies can imagine. And after all the noise, the rumors, the anonymous sources, the veiled insults, he still got drafted. Clark made one final point that deserves more attention. Shedeur's arm, criminally underrated. The criticisms overblown. The scouts weren't evaluating Shedeur the quarterback. They were judging Shedeur, son of Deion, and it clouded their judgment, not in his favor. Now, Shedeur Sanders is officially in the league, and everything changes. Coach Prime has had a front row seat to how personal things can get behind closed doors in the NFL. And Ryan Clark pulled the curtain on how politics and grudges can get in the way of pure talent evaluation. But the question now is, what happens next? What happens when Shedeur starts connecting passes in Cleveland, when he starts reading defenses, moving the chains, and winning games? What happens when the uncoachable kid becomes the locker room leader? Because make no mistake, this kid's story isn't ending. It's just beginning. Or was this a coordinated hit job on Coach Prime? Or just a case of old school jealousy? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to follow the rest of this revenge tour, because believe me, it's heating up. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. Because if Shedeur Sanders starts balling out this season, it's going to be one of the greatest comeback stories the NFL has seen in years.